If you're looking for some unique and original music that doesn't cave to a genre, follow us at Replicant Band. Link is in the description. Hello everyone, and at long last, we are finally going to touch on Tyler the Creator's 2017 album, Flower Boy. Before we go into the actual album though, I just want to give some general context before the album's release. Coming off of his album Cherry Bomb, which received mostly mixed and negative reviews, Tyler knew that with his next project, he'd have to step up his game.
I just knew if this album wasn't good, I would be fucked. That's how I felt, and some people would disagree, but I'm like, man, I'm nothing right now.
You felt that way coming off Cherry Bomb?
Yeah, because everyone hated it, except for like real music lover who cares about drums. Like I opened a rap album with a rock song.
Yeah.
Most niggas is like, ugh. And then Buffalo comes, you can barely hear what I'm saying. Then Pilot come and it's this 80s music, so they're out because they want rap. Then Run comes, doom, doom, they don't know. And then Find Your Wings come and it's like, okay, this is chill. Then Cherry Bomb just punches them. So they're out. And a lot of people didn't know how to take it. So
well, like Find Your Wings and stuff felt like
he did this by taking his technical and musical talent up to a whole nother level, and going in a more jazzy neo-soul direction compared to Cherry Bomb's distorted rock and soul sound. Tyler also wanted to make Flower Boy a much more personal album than Cherry Bomb, which he purposely kept distant. This leads into the several themes that Tyler touches on in this album, which to this day are still somewhat shrouded in mystery, as Tyler has never talked in detail about the themes of this album, or from what I can remember, any album really. The whole album is produced by Tyler for the first time, something that he would also continue to do on his next project, Igor. And this album also has a lot more standout features, with guest appearances from artists like A$AP Rocky, Rex Orange County, and Frank Ocean. Now that we have some basic context around the album, let's take a deep dive into Tyler the Creator's Flower Boy. The album starts off with the song Foreword, which is an appropriate title as it introduces the new sound and direction Tyler will be taking with this album. Tyler starts off by listing a number of metaphorical questions. He asks himself how many cars and material things can he buy until he loses the motivation that drives him to do the creative things that he does. He asks how much drive can he have until he either runs out of ideas entirely or is stopped by an outside force, such as a record label. How much road can they pave for Tyler until he loses everything he had before as well as his notoriety? And finally, how much land can there be until he loses the plot entirely and either gives up on music or is forced to? These 4 lines are important as they set up the general theme of the song, which is Tyler's motivation and creative force being brought into question. Tyler continues these metaphors in the next lines, telling us how he's always preferred being in the woods compared to on the beach. This is Tyler telling us that he's always wanted to distance himself from people, whether that be in a musical context, where Tyler sees himself as constantly going in more original and creative directions than his contemporaries, or maybe more in a real life sense, of keeping this distance between the crowds and paving out his own path in a more discreet environment. Tyler goes into more metaphorical questions, this time relating to his fans and status, asking how much cooler can he get until he runs out of fans, relating to how there are lots of fan groups who turn on an artist once they actually get the notoriety they deserve. These fans claim the artist is a sellout, simply for doing what they love and just getting more money for it. How many fans will he have before they turn on the AC? Meaning how many fans will Tyler have before his career goes cold and he fades away? The bridge, sung by Rex Orange County, shows us Tyler's doubtfulness and his experience of loneliness and isolation. He's talking about how he hasn't seen his friends in a while and that nothing lasts forever, most likely referring to the disbandment of his previous rap collective, Odd Future. Before going back into these metaphorical questions, Tyler thanks the girls that he apparently led on. He uses a play on words by claiming that they kept his head on straight, which as we'll see through the course of the album, is in relation to Tyler's sexuality, and that whilst he was with these girls, he wasn't really being true to himself. Tyler continues with the metaphorical questions, asking how much money he'll earn until he's seen as a slave. Tyler contrasts the typical gold chains that rappers wear with the chains that tied down slaves. It could also be relating to the music industry, with Tyler questioning how much money he'll get before he perceives himself as a slave to the music industry. Tyler then goes on with this theme of race and starts commenting on the Black Lives Matter movement. I think in these lines he's trying to show that he cares and understands the situation and the uproar towards this racially motivated police brutality. But he's not going to get himself tangled up in it, so instead plays it cool when confronted by the police. As Tyler says, he's got enough money to know that his car is paid in full. He's going to do whatever he can to deal with the police as quickly as possible, and give them no reasons to shoot him like the many other black people that suffered from this police brutality. Tyler then seemingly starts flexing about all of the things he owns, such as a huge mansion and a pool in his backyard. But then he contrasts this with the final lines where he says you need to keep your head afloat in this pool, otherwise you'll drown. And that's what he swims in. Tyler is using this pool as a metaphor, which is representing the struggles of everyone's life. The act of drowning could represent someone succumbing to something, whether that literally be drowning or perhaps on a more metaphorical level, succumbing to things like alcoholism and drug addiction. Everyone is swimming in this pool, it's just a question of if you can stay afloat or not. Tyler swims in this pool, showing that he is more than capable of keeping himself afloat, but he looks around him and sees all the other people struggling. All that he does is tell them to keep afloat, but can't find another way to help these struggling people out. The outro, sung yet again by Rex Orange County, shows the inner thoughts of Tyler reflecting on his life, and considering if his actions and artistry will leave any substantial impact after he's gone. Tyler brings up suicidal thoughts as well, by asking if he were to fall and not come back, would anyone know or care? He also questions aspects like life after death, wondering if he'd ever come back in a different form after he's dead. This ends Foreword on a sad, bitter note, making us put Tyler's mental health into the forefront of our minds when going into the next song. Tyler seems to be in an extremely doubtful and depressive state, which perhaps could be coming from being isolated from his previous friends from Odd Future, and also looking at how privileged he is compared to everyone else, but also how he chooses not to try to do anything to support their cause. This leads into the next song, Where This Flower Blooms, which starts off with an instrumental that instantly sounds more uplifting than the previous song. Tyler starts off by reminiscing on his early years of making music, and mentions how he used to sleep on his grandma's carpet due to not having a bed, reminding us of the poor conditions Tyler was living in before he got famous. This contrasts with the previous braggadocious lines about his mansion, showing us that Tyler hasn't lost his mind to excessive egoism. Tyler continues to justify this point by telling us how he used to rent out these expensive cars and avoid the repo man. However, due to his hard work and dedication, he can now afford to just outright buy these cars. This is the start of a continuous theme we'll see throughout this album, as throughout the album, Tyler sets up each song to be a part of this journey he is going on in this expensive car. Frank Ocean sings the chorus, talking about how the simp sun is shining on him. If you didn't already know, before simp seemed to lose all of its meaning recently, simp meant males who put themselves in a subservient position to a female in hopes of winning them over. In the bridge, Tyler makes the comparison of him improving as an artist to the act of a flower blooming. With time, Tyler has matured from the somewhat childish lyrics that often appeared on his previous projects. At the start of the second verse, Tyler continues to talk about his feelings of isolation and how nobody wants to be around him anymore. However, he wonders if this could just be his ego. Possibly due to the status he's now gained, people don't want to associate with him because they are jealous of Tyler's fame in comparison to them. Tyler proceeds to tell his fans, and more specifically the black kids in his audience, to be who they want to be. Especially in the black community, there are a lot of expectations of what you should and shouldn't do, and how you should or shouldn't appear. Now that Tyler has a platform to project his voice, he's telling these kids to not conform to a cultural stereotype and live for themselves. Tyler goes on with this point, talking about things like dyeing his hair blue, having manicured nails, and using coconut oil for his skin, all of which would be conventionally considered as being quite feminine. This not only reinforces the idea of being true to yourself, but also brings back the theme of sexuality from earlier. Tyler also mentions his hair follicles are thinning, linking back to Tyler's maturity that came with getting older. The chorus and bridge is repeated before being brought into the third verse, where Tyler again talks about his maturity. He also touches on the leaves he is making, meaning money, and how he's keeping it in his branches so that his family can eat, meaning that on top of getting the expensive stuff that he wants, it's essential for Tyler to share as much money as possible with his friends and family. Tyler ends off this verse by talking about giving life and dropping seeds, which could possibly relate to Tyler either giving advice to his listeners about how you should be yourself, but it could also relate to the other artists that Tyler has worked with, and how because they worked with him, they were given a life in the music industry. Either way, it relates back to the theme of nature and flowers by mentioning the seeds and birds. This leads into the track Sometimes, which is a track that really starts putting the concept of this album to the forefront of the listeners' minds. Tyler has started this journey in his car and has turned on the radio. Actual radio host Shane Powers is presenting the show, and seemingly is doing a phone-in segment, where he's receiving calls from the listeners. The person he picks stays quiet as the song progresses, before finally saying he wants to hear the song about him. This leads into See You Again, which is a blatant love song, so the themes of Tyler's sexuality are being brought up again, and it seems that he's finally being true to himself. At the time, lots of fans who heard this weirdly thought Tyler was trolling, but if he was, the whole meaning and artistry behind these moments would just look really dumb and out of place considering that Tyler has seemingly gained so much maturity compared to his previous projects. What we're essentially hearing is Tyler coming out of the closet, perhaps not claiming that he's fully gay, but at least that he has an attraction to men. This is why he's encouraging other people to do what they want and be whoever they want to be, because life's too short to succumb to the social pressures of what other people think is right or wrong. We then move on to the track See You Again, which, as Tyler describes in the first verse, is about Tyler's ideal fantasy whom he only sees in his dreams. In a weird way, this love song reinforces the themes of loneliness and isolation, possibly even more than any other previous song on the album. The person Tyler is longing for isn't real, and in real life, there will most likely be no one that can top this imaginary perfect person for Tyler. Pair that with the previous song's themes of being separated from all of his friends, and this paints a vivid image of Tyler being isolated and alone in his room, with spouts of happiness where his imagination and dream world takes over, until he wakes up and is thrust back into this depressive state. Tyler constantly mourns about the loss of this ideal person upon waking up, by using phrases such as "I don't know if I'm gonna see you again" and "I'm about to go to war," all of which represent the dream person dying upon Tyler waking up. Tyler continues throughout the rest of this song by describing that he's not going to give up trying to find someone similar in the real world, as well as giving actual descriptions of certain features this imaginary person has, such as rose-tinted cheeks and brown eyes. Some people have claimed that this is alluding to the rumoured boyfriend of Tyler, Wyatt, who is frequently seen in pictures with Tyler. Even if this is the case, I don't think it holds any relevance in the grand scheme of the album, as Wyatt is never mentioned by name, and the person that Tyler is talking about is imaginary, so there's no real point in pondering if it's Wyatt or not. The chorus is then repeated before being played off with a final horn section, bringing us into the song Who Dat Boy. This song makes a stark contrast from the previous song by being introduced with some screeching strings to kick off the track. The overall theme of the track sees Tyler talking about himself from a third-person perspective and drawing comparisons between him and other artists of his caliber. For example, he makes a point of saying that he feels like a true artist due to the immense amount of things he does in other areas outside of music, such as directing videos and designing clothing. He also brings up his previous album, Cherry Bomb. A poignant song on Cherry Bomb was a song called Find Your Wings, which had the message of cutting yourself loose from everyone's expectations and living for yourself. A message that we can see has been carried over and reinforced in this album. In this track though, we can see that due to Tyler's state of mind, he's contrasted the idea of him finding his wings and flying with his feet being firmly planted back down on the ground and running. Tyler ends the first verse off by saying it's Young T, which was the exact same sign-off that Tyler gave in the song Death Camp, again from the album Cherry Bomb. Although this constant re-emergence of his previous album may seem appropriate purely because it was his last release, as we can see, the release of Cherry Bomb and more importantly, the fan and critical reaction to it, affected Tyler on a much more mental level.
But I'm like, man, I'm nothing right now.
You felt that way coming off Cherry Bomb?
Yeah, because everyone hated it.
It's in the chorus where we can maybe establish that the perspective Tyler is approaching from is the media, which before the release of this album had this strange fascination with trying to make Tyler seem extremely controversial, and in some cases trying to cancel him entirely. Just to remind you, this was something that had been going on throughout Tyler's whole career, even leading him to get banned from countries such as the UK and Australia. We then get the second verse being rapped by A$AP Rocky, which doesn't really have much to say outside of the typical braggadociousness and sexual lyrics that's associated with a Rocky feature. The chorus is then repeated before being brought into the third verse, which is rapped by both Tyler and Rocky. At the start, it seems like the final verse will follow the same style of Rocky's verse, as it starts with Tyler and Rocky saying things like how the sky isn't the limit, and how much more they can expand in their other business ventures. But towards the end, Tyler mentions how his mother is worried about him because he's so ill. This makes a contrast with the previous lines where they're bragging about their money and status, which has the slang term of ill associated with it. For example, like someone saying your car is so ill. And it contrasts this slang term with the mother's actual worry for Tyler as he looks physically ill, as in sick. Whereas Tyler's mother wants him to stay in bed, if he smells the opportunity, or as Tyler says, the bread, he will happily get out of bed and work, no matter what physical or emotional state he's in. He pairs this bread he's making with his mother telling him to watch his weight, probably meaning that Tyler should be more careful with the amount of deals he's making within the music industry, as they can quickly get complicated and Tyler may at some point need to start owing people money that he doesn't have. Tyler ends the song off by getting back into his McLaren and speeding off. As the song's barrage of strings ramp up, they cut off immediately once Tyler seemingly hits a pothole in the road, leading into the song Pothole. The song starts quickly with a verse from Tyler, where he continues to talk about what his mother told him. It seems that this advice she was giving Tyler was from a while ago, and was teaching him how to be street smart in the music industry, as well as life in general. This calls back to the pool in Foreword, where for the most part his mum is teaching him how to keep his head above the water and to not drown from the social pressure that will be placed upon him once he hits it big. It seems that in this part of Tyler's car journey, after all the bragging and egoism seen on Who Dat Boy, he's gone back to this more self-reflective and realistic state. Whereas in Foreword, Tyler seemed reluctant to help these people that were drowning in the pool, it's now shown that he's always attempted to try help these people that were less fortunate than himself. But due to whatever reasons, these unfortunate people refused Tyler's assistance. This seems to make Tyler feel guilty, as well as confused on what to do in this situation. He knows that he can help these people, and the fact they're refusing his help saddens him. But he also knows that he has his own problems to deal with, so instead opts to say that they can rely on him, before he has to set off on his own journey. We can tell here that all this is starting to take a mental toll on him, possibly making him think that he's too privileged, and that he thinks he's better than other common people, maybe giving himself a god complex. He starts to explain his thought process by saying he has too much drive, obviously referencing his car, but also relating to how he's a very driven and focused person. So although he would like to help these people, he needs to keep his eye on the prize, otherwise he will fall behind the musical curve, and won't be pushing his music and genre forward. As Tyler says, if he ends up getting distracted during this focus-driven process, he could end up crashing, making his progress on a new musical venture stunted, or in some cases, stopped entirely. During this creative process, Tyler is keeping a close eye on the musical landscape, as well as what he's producing, to make sure that he can pull off his album effectively and not have shade thrown at him from critics and haters. This again seems to be a lingering feeling coming off of his album Cherry Bomb, which, as I mentioned previously, was met with extremely poor reviews upon release. I think it's important to mention that all these lyrics I'm explaining are presented with brilliant wordplay within the context of the album, as the meanings I've laid out are conveyed through metaphors of the outdoors as well as his car. For example, in the segment I just analysed, he uses the weatherman to represent the media's reaction towards his next release. He uses windshield wipers to represent how he's going to be more cautious and ready for a negative reaction with his new release due to his previous backlash coming off Cherry Bomb. And finally uses the word shade in the context of getting shade from the sun, as well as the insults and criticism that could be thrown his way. All of this genius wordplay is scattered throughout the album, and I've rarely mentioned it, and will most likely not mention it throughout the rest of the video, purely because I'm laying things out basically so that the meanings can be more easily understood. However, I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate it though, as it's just another aspect of Flower Boy that is brilliantly crafted and enriches the whole listening experience. We are then brought to the chorus, which is sung by Jaden Smith, essentially giving a summary of the themes that have been touched on already in this song. We are then brought into the second verse, where it seems that Tyler's doubtfulness is starting to make another appearance, as he starts talking about how he's surrounded by people who would betray him for the motive of money or status. Since Tyler is aware of this, he always sets himself up for someone to hate on him. However, he knows this prospect is unlikely, as they are all talk most of the time. He then goes on to talk about how he watches cartoons in his mansion alone, again reinforcing the idea of loneliness and isolation. Tyler then goes back to the themes of race and racial profiling by the police, by mentioning how it feels amazing to drive by the police in his McLaren, most likely because it doesn't match their typical racist thoughts of where a black man should be in society. He mentions the police by the common slang term pigs, which feeds into the next line where he says that he's stopped eating bacon, which was surprisingly actually quite a staple for Tyler, with a large amount of his fan base knowing that bacon was his favourite food. The fact that he stopped eating bacon shows Tyler's evolution, not only as an artist, but as a person. He's using the food he eats as a metaphor for him taking different paths in his journey throughout life. We can see this in the next line where he claims that he's still hungry, so we can see that he's still trying to reach the same heights of musical innovation and fame as he did previously, but he's trying to go about it in a different way than he had done before. Tyler continues to talk about his loneliness by comparing the things he talks about to his friends with what they tell him about. For example, whereas Tyler can only talk about the new things he's bought and the new music he's created, his friends talk to him about the people that are close to them and their loved ones. Tyler then mentions about how everyone is a sheep within the music industry, and how they're afraid to rebel against any shady practices that may be going on behind the scenes, purely because they know if they do, they could lose money over it. He then goes back to the pool analogy again, by claiming that he'd rather drown in the pool than go along with the herd. In the next lines, he talks about his fan base, and how a lot of them can also be chalked up to sheep following the crowd. For example, upon the release of Cherry Bomb, people weren't ready for the style Tyler was going for, so instead of embracing this new musical direction, they instead shut him down and called the album bad, simply because they just didn't understand what he was trying to do. Tyler starts to consider if this is how his fans react to someone else saying his music is bad, will they do this same back and forth with his personality? Tyler ends the song by claiming that he thinks his last 4 albums were a success in his eyes, and that although he hasn't found the true love he's searching for yet, he's okay with that because at this point in time, he thinks his cars will suffice. Due to the amount of time Tyler talks about love, and the perfect person he needs in his life, it seems like he's more trying to convince himself that what he's got now is good enough for him, rather than him actually believing it. That ends Pothole, leading into the next song, Garden Shed. This song has less lyrics in the first half, as it takes the approach of a slower R&B tune. As we can see in the few lyrics that are sung at the start, however, this song is about breaking out of the cocoon, and yet again promoting the message of being yourself. In Tyler's case, he's trying to be true to himself by showing his true feelings towards his sexuality. He's worried about the consequences that will come from saying this, so has previously held back saying anything related to the topic. And now that he's in the position where he's going to say something, he's struggling to find the words to describe the emotions he's feeling. It's in the second verse where Tyler starts properly rapping, and is where we can see what Tyler was hiding. We can see from the opening lyrics that the garden shed Tyler is talking about is an extended metaphor for someone hiding their sexuality, much like the phrase coming out of the closet. Tyler says that's where he's been hiding, and that's where his real love was in. Obviously, the idea of being gay was confusing to him, and it didn't help that there were countless controversies over his previous homophobic rap lyrics. It's again this idea of the media's reaction to him that held back Tyler from these true feelings. And in retrospect, he was right, as upon the release of this album, although he was given support by his fans, who, in reality, didn't really care that much, there were also several cases of people writing articles calling him a troll, or saying that he was simply claiming that he was gay to avoid any further scrutiny from the media. Tyler continues to tell us that he's had these feelings since he was a kid, but he thought it was just a phase. This makes it appear that during Tyler's whole musical career, he was trying to cover up his sexuality by doubling down on the homophobic lyrics, in an attempt to not make anyone suspicious about his sexuality. He starts describing what features he would like in a partner, such as beige tan skin and freckles, before again saying he had to keep it on the down low. He also claims that he did have sex with women, but he wasn't really all that interested, and only did it in order to tell his friends, again as to not raise any suspicions. Towards the end of the track, Tyler starts using clever wordplay to describe his apprehension over the whole situation, and even starts considering suicide. He talks about stepping up the ladder trying to grab the rings of Saturn, which seems like a positive image, but paired with this same confusion and apprehension, we start to see the image of Tyler climbing up a ladder and grabbing the ring of Saturn, or rather a noose, and hanging himself. This reminds us of the infamous Yonkers video, where at the end he's seen to be doing the exact same thing, which coincidentally was Tyler's most famous song up until this album, and had the lyric of "I'm not gay, I just want to boogie to some Marvin." Again, showing that throughout Tyler's whole career he was hiding these emotions. The song ends on the somber sounds of a guitar, as we are brought into the next song, Boredom. In this song we go back to the themes of loneliness, as the song starts with an intro yet again sung by Rex Orange County. With the chorus of this song, Tyler is reflecting on his status, as well as his time management, and is trying to find time to do something that he would actually like to do. Now that he's an artist with popularity and acclaim, he started missing out on the things he once enjoyed. We can even see this all the way back on Goblin, on the title track, where he talks to Dr. TC about how he's too busy to skate anymore. Tyler has gotten so caught up in the business side of the music making process, and as a result is making his life and the time he spends less enjoyable as a whole. Tyler is not actually introduced on this track until the second verse, where he starts by describing the state of his bedroom. Although it seems like Tyler's isolation in this track is a negative negative thing, the bedroom reminds us of a previous lyric from Who Dat Boy, where his mother told him to stay in bed and to watch his weight. It seems here that Tyler has finally taken his mother's advice, and has been putting his physical health before his wealth. As we can hear, he's eaten cereal as a snack, however he hasn't been eating any proper meals, leading to him being hungry. This is an overall positive change, which could only come from Tyler isolating himself away from everyone else. The fact that he's relating this pursuit for wealth, in relation to words like starving and dehydrating, shows that this is a hard thing for him to overcome. However, once he gets past this, he will have broadened his mind and will come out on the other side as a more well-rounded person. Tyler also brings into question his friend's loyalty towards him. However, this is most likely meant to represent the typical FOMO, related to when you're sat doing nothing whilst your friends are doing their own separate things. We are then brought back to the chorus again and then proceed to the third verse. Tyler starts this verse by again describing the extent of his boredom and how he has only seen the walls of his bedroom since the morning. Tyler leaves in these parts in the song where he's trying to sing with his deep tone, and you can hear him get annoyed that he can't pull it off properly, perhaps trying to show that he is self-conscious about the tone of his voice. He continues to talk about the same overall theme of the album by mentioning how his wealth is not equaling happiness, and how he wants to go back to the old times where he used to hang around and eat junk food in parking lots with his friends. In the closing lyrics of this verse, Tyler stares up at his ceiling and thinks to himself about where he's going to end up with this newfound maturity and development. At the end of the song, we can hear a car door close as the radio is turned back on, making us think that during these last two songs, Tyler was in this garden shed having these existential thoughts about his life. The radio commentary leads us into the next track, I Ain't Got Time, as Shane Powers announces they have some brand new music for Golf Radio listeners. The song opens up with a sample from the 1969 Belshazzar song, Introduction, giving an immediate change in pace from the more chilled out songs before it. This song will be about Tyler looking at the people around him and dismissing their involvement in relation to him, simply because he knows that all they want is something from him, not actually wanting to like or associate with him as a person. The line of I Ain't Got Time also contrasts with the previous song where he keeps telling himself to find the time to do something. Tyler starts the first verse by saying that he needs a Kleenex for his tears because he can't believe he's gotten this far in his rap career. He then starts to talk about his car, and more specifically the white River Phoenix lookalike that is in the passenger seat, which I think again is relating to this imaginary dream boy Tyler wants in his life. Even in these more upbeat songs, Tyler can't escape these feelings of loneliness. He ends the verse off by again taking aim at his critics and basically saying he doesn't care what any of them say and how their words won't deter him from doing anything he wants to do in the future. The chorus is then repeated before we are brought into the second verse, where Tyler mentions Nat Turner for the second time on this album, the first being on Foreword. Nat Turner was an enslaved African American who led a rebellion of slaves and free blacks in Southampton County, Virginia in 1831. During the revolt, he moved from plantation to plantation, freeing and recruiting slaves. Because Turner's intentions at the time were frowned upon by whites and the general law, he had to devise a way by which he could spread his plans without giving up the plot. It is believed that one of the ways Turner summoned fellow conspirators to join his fight was through the use of inconspicuous songs. Tyler is comparing himself to Nat Turner in the sense that he's managed to get followers through his songs, and as a result they start copying the things he does and the style he has. In the following lyrics, Tyler sticks with this theme of race by mentioning all the typical stereotypes of a black man, and saying that due to these qualities, it's less likely you're going to get to these positions where people try to copy your style and bow down to you because of the work you've produced. After this verse, the song takes a complete left turn with the introduction of these darker synth lines. After a short bridge where Tyler repeats the phrase tick-tock, we are brought into the third verse where Tyler starts talking about the success of his annual Camp Flognor festival. He then mentions how the next line will shock people, then proceeds to say that he was kissing white boys since 2004, which is something that would have shocked people. However, we already know Tyler was hiding these feelings several songs before this line, so it's not as big a shock to us. He goes on through this third verse to talk more about his collaborations with the shoe companies Vans and Converse, and how Converse opened up so many more creative possibilities than Vans did. Towards the end of this verse, he mentions how he gets neck, meaning oral sex, from someone who has broad shoulders, which again is a feature usually associated with males. He ends the song with one final verse where he mentions how whenever people see him, he'll either be wearing Converse or his own golf clothing, which shows how Tyler has turned himself into a true artist, and is doing many more creative things outside of music. He mentioned this before in a Larry King interview.
Like, I really want to sing, but my tone of voice is too deep to do what I want. So now I'm just listening to like Isaac Hayes and Barry White and things like that just to see how they use their voice. But I hate rapping only because it puts you in this like, in this box. And like I was scared for this interview because me being a rapper, I was scared of the type of questions that you would probably ask me, not even on purpose, just, you know, because I'm a rapper and things, and then people look at you different. Oh, he's a rap artist.
No, but you
that
just
doesn't
said
take much talent.
you just said you don't want to rap anymore.
I don't.
He then ends off the song by claiming that he is, in many ways, above a lot of other rappers because they all sound like clones of another rapper who created a certain sound first, whereas Tyler does his own thing, without pandering or conforming to a certain sound. As the outro plays, it fades out as we can start to hear a new song being played on Golf Radio. It's important to note the car sounds in the background, showing us that Tyler is still pushing forward in this ongoing car journey, laying all of his problems out and trying to figure out how to deal with them. We then move on to the two-part 911 and Mr. Lonely. In the opening of 911, we can hear that Tyler is addressing his problems with loneliness head on now, by portraying himself as the character of Mr. Lonely. He may be saying that his number is 911, as this is a number that is called for emergencies only, and is never used just to check up on someone. This shows us Tyler's state of mind, as he thinks none of his friends care enough about him to check up on him to see if he's okay, and in fact the only time someone calls him, it's only to do with their needs, or to talk to him about their problems. The way he repeats in the chorus how he'd like people to call him sometime reinforces how desperate Tyler is for any sort of human interaction, no matter how one-sided a conversation may be. He starts the first verse by saying his thirst levels are infinity and beyond, referencing Toy Story. However, in this context, Tyler is using it to describe how he's desperate for sex, in some senses just a much more intimate form of human interaction. He also says he needs a Beyonce, meaning he's desperate for a partner on the same level as Beyonce, who is typically seen as a queen in the music industry. Throughout this whole verse, he talks about all the things he owns. For example, he shouts out Elon Musk due to him having a Tesla, and he also mentions a sold-out show. But none of it matters, as whilst he's getting all these things and performing to all these people, it doesn't matter as much because he doesn't have someone to love to experience these things alongside himself. He ends the verse by again essentially begging that if anyone thinks they fit the description of someone Tyler would like spending time with, to hit him up on his phone. We are then brought to a bridge before going back into the chorus, which all repeat these same themes and ideas. We then go to a short second verse sung by Frank Ocean, which brings up the same idea from Boredom about having to find time, but in the context of this song, he's telling us to find time to talk to someone on a more personal level. Tyler comes back for a final verse on this half of the song, reinforcing the same idea seen throughout the album so far, about how material things are not giving him the happiness that he requires. He also mentions at the end how he can only keep going through the motions and acting like everything is okay for so long, before snapping and being thrust into this depressive state. We are then brought into the second part of this song, Mr. Lonely, which already sounds like it's going to pick up the pace from 911 due to the chants at the beginning. These chants repeat the phrase, "I can't even lie, I've been lonely as fuck," which is a bizarre chant to have, as the usual use for a chant is to big someone or something up. For example, like a chant for a certain football team or whatever. This idea of having a whole crew chanting this line is somewhat comedic, and this is exactly what Tyler wanted.
I can't even lie. Wait, like, what? What's the?
I just imagine a nigga in a wife beater on Valentine's Day, like in the hood, and like.
Is he talking to his friends? Or
I don't know who
in the
he's
mirror?
talking to, but it's a quick shot of that nigga like, man, I can't even lie, I've been lonely as fuck, nigga. Like, just being honest with his homies or something. And I was just like, man, that'd be really funny to chant. But it's the perfect setup for when that song like comes on.
Yeah.
And it sets you up for like what's about to happen. It's honest, but it's right here, and they go crazy, but
it's like so sad it's hilarious.
It's
like the.
After the beat kicks in, we are brought into this one huge rap verse, which is one of the only times on this whole album where Tyler goes all out in the rapping sense. He starts off by disagreeing with the common notion of the loudest speaker in the room being the weakest. The idea of that being that they're trying harder to be more noticeable because they have more to hide and cover up for. Tyler claims that these loud people aren't weak, however, they are just lonely, obviously using himself as a place of reference. Tyler then references how he writes about people that don't exist, which in the context of the album is linking back to See You Again, and how he yearned for this perfect person who did not exist. However, it's not out of the question that Tyler is also mentioning the countless characters that he created on his previous albums, and the several alter egos that he personified, therefore making himself somewhat of a phony. Just a side note, I've actually made 3 videos on that topic, so if you haven't seen them, I've linked them in the description. Tyler also says that he wants to win so bad, telling us that throughout all the critical acclaim that he's gathered, he still feels like he hasn't achieved what he's wanted. He mentions how he can't be lifted up like Gallardo, referencing another sports car, which shows that even when Tyler is trying to distance himself from these material things to find someone to love, he can't get these things out of his mind completely. He then continues to talk about more cars like the McLaren and Tesla, before having this self-realization where he says that he knows we're sick of him talking about cars. The next lyrics lay out very clearly what we've been picking up on throughout the whole album, where Tyler describes purchasing these material things somewhat as a replacement for the missing people in his life, and more specifically, the missing loved one in his life. He even says here that he's been doing this for so long that he can't even tell if he enjoys getting these things anymore, but he keeps buying these material things now purely on instinct. He mourns the fact that he hasn't been able to find true love, but then proceeds to say that he could find someone tomorrow. But perhaps because they don't match his expectations, Tyler puts off trying to find his real love, and he compares the regret he has to someone regretting a vasectomy, which, as we know, is a procedure that can be rarely reversed. This puts into perspective Tyler's time management, and how maybe because all of the other things, such as music, clothing and business that Tyler has to focus on, he doesn't have the time to go looking for a loved one, and this is something Tyler regrets not focusing on. Tyler then brings up the well-known mirror from Snow White, as he asks the rhetorical question of who's the loneliest of them all, knowing that the answer is going to be him, as he's already stated to himself that he's the loneliest man alive. He also brings up the mythical love angel Cupid, who was also mentioned on See You Again. Whereas in that song, Tyler was dreaming about how Cupid hit him with precision, in the real world it seems like Cupid is acting stupid and missing all of his shots on Tyler, resulting in him feeling like he has no one to love. Tyler then tries to chalk up his lack of connection to another person's feelings to never having a pet when he was younger. Tyler knows that there are more fish in the sea, however because of his mindset, he feels like no matter how many people he interacts with, he won't be able to make a connection with them, and pins the blame on himself. He continues this idea with clever wordplay, by saying things like, I never had a dog, so I never been good with bitches because I never threw a ball, as he thinks the people he associates with only talk to him for his money, and how he's basically begging them to just check up on him sometime and actually have a dialogue with him. He ends by hoping he never has to dial the 911 number, most likely referencing a situation in which he might harm himself or even commit suicide, in which the emergency services would have to be called. This is the most depressed and lonely we've seen Tyler so far on this album, and shows us the most extreme consequences of this loneliness and isolation that Tyler has been riddled with throughout this whole album. This leaves us on an extremely depressing note before leading into the song Dropping Seeds, which is a short song with a verse from Lil Wayne. In Wayne's verse, he has a lot less to say, with him touching on things more in the line with his style of rapping, such as sex and money. However, he uses genius wordplay all the way throughout. For example, saying he's like Adam in the Garden of Eve, rather than in the Garden of Eden, establishing the sexual nature of this verse. He's also comparing himself to this well-known religious figure, and is telling us that he knows having sex with this woman is a sin. I see this song more as a light-hearted interlude to give us a break from the extremely depressing stuff we were just hearing in 911 and Mr. Lonely, maybe relating to Wayne just dropping bars on a track, as well as linking into the overall flower theme of the album. This interlude leads us into the next song, November. In this song we get back into the mind of Tyler, and this time start hearing more about his insecurities and fears relating to his life, career and relationships. He starts the song off with these almost inaudible lyrics, before being brought into the chorus where he constantly wants to be brought back to November. Tyler is using this month as a metaphor for a specific time in his life that was filled with hope and enjoyment. It's not confirmed at this point in the track why this month is so important. He then starts off the first verse with questions, such as what if his manager is fucking him over? This sort of paranoia within the lyrics is somewhat reminiscent of the opening lines of Foreword, showing us how far we've come in this journey and how much of Tyler's inner thoughts we've explored. However, in this song, the questions are a lot more literal, with Tyler in somewhat of a panic about things like if his manager Clancy is fucking him over, which in retrospect is quite contradictory to what he said about him in the past, as even on this album on the song Pothole, Tyler praises Clancy and basically says he wouldn't be where he was if it wasn't for him. This shows the state of Tyler's fractured mind and the way he starts wrongly perceiving people, becoming very skeptic of their actions. This would be down to the previous songs, where we could see that he saw the people that he associated with as sheep, who only looked to him as a way to get more money. He then brings back the song Who Dat Boy, and asks if the message of that song is rhetorical, obviously showing that Tyler is worrying that his relevancy in the music landscape is waning. He continues through this verse to delve into his paranoia, worrying about things like his accountant taking his money rather than paying his taxes. He worries if his music is too weird or niche for people to get into. He's worried he's going to end up being known for the things he says rather than the art he makes. He's also worried he's going to lose his friends over track 7, Garden Shed, which was the point in the album where Tyler really started opening up about his sexuality. It seems that all of this stuff is piling up on Tyler's mind. However, with him being alone and isolated, these thoughts are just left to linger and mutate into even worse thoughts without anyone reassuring him that everything will be okay in the end. As a result of him not trusting people like his accountant, he has concerns that he's going to end up back where he started, in Ladera with no money. He then says he's writing all of these songs because his Wi-Fi wasn't working, showing us that Tyler would much rather distract himself with things like social media rather than confront his feelings and fears. But when ignoring them doesn't become an option, they all quickly start re-emerging and pile up on Tyler's mind. He has one last line trying to convince himself that everything is going fine for him, by telling us that even though he only wrote 2 verses last year, he made over $5 million, making his life perfect. This is the final line before Tyler almost turns on himself and starts asking if his life is really perfect. These constant deflections by focusing on materialistic things have finally come to a breaking point, and Tyler can no longer act like everything is fine purely because he's now got all of the things he couldn't buy previously. Tyler thinks his fans will start hating on him due to his new direction from his previous projects, and the reception to Cherry Bomb didn't help with this, as in retrospect it was the first time Tyler really started to experiment outside the field of purely rap and hip hop. We then get confirmation on what Tyler's November was, when he mentions it was in the summer of 2006. It sounds like Tyler is about to start reminiscing about happier times in his life, but before he can, we hear a car horn, showing that he was losing attention on the road. This breaks him out of this reminiscent state, and back into one of paranoia, where he starts wondering if he thought the brake was the gas, and if he ended up crashing. So Tyler decides to pull over in order to let himself get taken away by these previous happy memories in peace. The chorus is repeated as Tyler tries to take himself back to his November. The beat then quietens down to hear a barrage of Tyler's friends start telling us what time in their life was their November. This leads us to a bridge where we can hear Tyler longing to be taken back to these better days. Mixed in between these lines, Tyler is admitting to himself that he isn't fine. However, at the end of this bridge, we hear someone say, "My November is right now," giving us listeners, as well as Tyler, a much more optimistic realization about how you should be living and enjoying life in the moment, rather than looking back and wishing things could be back to the way they used to be. We can actually hear this instant change in Tyler, where it seems that he's found someone important enough to write a song about, meaning that Tyler may have found someone that matches his expectations of the person in See You Again. He says towards the end of the track that he's going to call this person so they can hear the song he's made. However, already sets himself up for disappointment by saying he knows the reaction that's going to be given and that as a result he'll disappear and stay back. He also says if they don't answer, he'll just leave a voicemail with the song. As we can hear at the end, they didn't answer the phone. Which leads us into the penultimate song, Glitter, which is seemingly going to be the love song that Tyler wrote to this person. This song has a much more optimistic feel than most of the songs before it, as Tyler opens the song saying how this person's been on his mind, and that he's losing his mind because he wants the relationship they have together to be more than just friends. As we are brought into the chorus, it's almost like Tyler can't contain his excitement as he starts describing how he feels when he meets up with this person. We are then brought into the first verse, where we can see the reintroduction of the mirror on the wall, which was last seen on Mr. Lonely, arguably his lowest point in the whole album. However, in this song, it's repurposed so Tyler can instead ask the rhetorical question of who's the brightest of them all, showing that Tyler has gained this newfound optimism and encouragement after taking time to look back and reflect on all of the bad stuff that has happened in his life. It was the line in November which related to living in the moment that has caused this change, and as we can now see, Tyler starts claiming that he has high self-esteem now. Tyler mentions the phrase uno peso, which is a form of currency in Mexico. Tyler now realizes that these people who wanted his money never cared about what he had to say. So rather than going along with them and giving them money for any form of human interaction, he's now going to keep that money, as he knows there are other people out there that do actually care about what he's got to say. These people never helped or encouraged Tyler in anything he did, so now he's just not going to associate with them ever again. We then have a contrast between the optimistic beat and the lyrics, where he starts talking about the heat he's got, which in this case means a gun, and he talks about how he'll use it on himself the day that this person leaves Tyler's life. This shows us that although we thought Tyler is over the things that had brought him into this depressive state previously, if this love leaves Tyler's life, everything could go back to the way they were, and most likely would end up making Tyler's life even worse than it was during songs like 911. However, the song still goes along with this optimistic tone, as we are led back into the chorus, with Tyler still seeming a whole lot more happy due to this person being in his life. He's doing exactly what the person said in November, and is not worrying about the past or future, but is instead living for the moment and taking things as they come. After the chorus is repeated, the pitch of the track is lowered, as well as Tyler's voice, perhaps representing a darker, harsher reality check that Tyler is telling himself. He starts telling himself that it's only him that is getting joy out of the time he spends with this other person, and that the relationship between both of them isn't going to work out, purely on the basis that it's one-sided, with only Tyler getting any enjoyment out of spending time together. He then starts to talk about how this person had pale skin, much like the person from See You Again, and how this person, without even knowing, made their true feelings towards Tyler completely transparent. Tyler would love this relationship to work out, but he knows it won't. Or rather, he can't change himself to suit this other person's needs. Rather than hiding these feelings away like he used to, Tyler is finally confronting these harsh realities, as he knows it will end up making him a better, more well-rounded and knowledgeable person once he's over it. He then ends off the verse by saying that he's stuck in their quicksand, showing that Tyler is still infatuated with this person, but begs them not to reawaken his hopes of having a relationship with them, because he already knows it's doomed from the start. The song comes to a somber, bittersweet end, as we can hear that the voicemail Tyler was sending didn't actually send because of poor connection, and we can hear Tyler right at the end say fuck to voice his annoyance. The final song on the album is an instrumental, so this is literally Tyler's final lyric on the album, which may sound like it ends on a really pessimistic note, of Tyler still being trapped with these emotions of grief. However, if you go listen to the final song, the beat on there sounds extremely optimistic yet again, perhaps making us think that since Tyler already knew the relationship wasn't going to work out, it was possibly for the best that the voicemail failed to go through, as it stops any more hopes of that working out reawakening. Tyler instead opts to move on entirely, and I think that's represented by the frequent noises of a baby at the start of the track, perhaps representing a new turn in Tyler's life, and a point where he's so free of anyone's thoughts about him that he can reinvent himself in any way that he wants. It's on this optimistic note where we hear the engines of Tyler's car turn off, as we end our journey with Flower Boy. It seems that this rough patch of depression and turmoil in Tyler's life has finally been able to be understood and overcome by him, and as a result, he will be able to go forward in his new ventures, whether that be music, clothing or films, with this new perspective of living for the moment. And with that comes the end of the album, and also the end of the video. If you watched this whole video, I appreciate you so much. This video took so long to make, and I hope everyone that was waiting for this video is pleased with what I came up with. A like and a subscribe goes a long way in supporting more content like this from me. And if you know any friends that might enjoy this kind of stuff, you could perhaps share this video to them as well. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.